Welcome back. Welcome back. So this portion of the last portion of the day, focusing primarily on organizations, is literally qualitative information. So if you are a CPAMOPOC organization online, it's an encouragement to put responses in the chat, and I will pass it around to organizations in the room. And the question is pretty simple for this one. What are some of the qualitative examples of equity, diversity, inclusive practices within your work, within organizations that you've experienced? It's a little bit qualitative. You did these things, you've done these things, we'd like to hear Natasha talk about this idea of embedding them in the organization. In conversation, Barrett was also talking about another organization that's part of this process that is Turner Honestly Performing Arts, shifting from gender towards to non-gender, and what that meant for the organization, but also for the industry. Again, trying to shift away from using that word sector and using that to use the industry. There's just so much going on within the arts that it should be considered industry. It does generate revenue, it does have an entrepreneurial capacity, it does have a social work and health capacity for many things shifting that project for understanding. So I'm looking at two organizations that I'm familiar with in the room, and I wonder if you could speak to this idea of some things that we learned from the process, some things that are really valuable for dealing with organization. And so we're even at 10 years, so we've gone through 10 cohorts of organizations in the CPAMOPOC process. And it's a reading, it's a gathering, so it's a sharing of knowledge within this part of the space. Anybody wants to start?
Yes, hello. Can you tell us who's online?
Who's online from the organizations? There is Natasha from the National Base. That's the only one. Yes. That's the only one I see online right now. From the cohorts. I can imagine the props. It's hard time. We can move along with the performance board. Yes, Jill, no for Sean.
I think starting the process, the block program, as well as kind of our learnings through other projects, the iterative process, right? That you learn, you implement, you try, and then it works, or it doesn't work, or it needs adjustment, so you try again. And I think one of the things that holds people back in this kind of work is that they're afraid to fail. They're afraid to ask the wrong question. They're afraid to ask stupid questions, but you have to ask in order to learn. You don't know what you don't know. So organizationally, that's how we operate. For all of our HR processes, our programming processes, our evaluation processes, like all of those things, we ask the student questions and try again.
Thank you. And what's resonating in a qualitative way is not only the experience and how important it is for arts organizations and artists to think about the experience. And that's also part of the process. And then this idea of also the fear to fail. as a facilitator and co-director, it's often interesting where this idea for organizations and for also the teams come into the process feel that they will say the wrong thing. Always asking you, what should I say? What? And that I think that is that idea, the fear to fail, the fear to be vulnerable in their knowledge capacity. And I think what's beautiful in doing this over the past 10 years is actually allowing the vulnerability to arrive as part of the process. And then really thinking through what is the things that allow us to be vulnerable in space together and empowering everyone to the organizations to build back and to see the strengths of the person that we do. We often say, and I'll share about password to care and stuff, but we often say a lot about who are you representing in the room? Are you representing yourself as a person? Or are you looking at the role that you do within the organization? Then while they may intersect and collide and intersect the same things, and so you're able to then go as a Black person, as the co-director of CPAMO, and that those are both valuable. We find when we work for organizations. And what I've noticed over the 10 years of the program is many participants often are so concerned about failing or saying something. But the organization is actually it needs to send warnings. It needs to put warnings. And I think encouraging both the vulnerability of the organization and the employees or the arts workers is the brief sweet spot.
We'll just be saying we got so that having worked in some of the majors, one thing that I really see is that we need to be part of a community or the system. We hear that so we get it. And I need to be part of the organizations and we need to be part of the self-esteem. Now we can consider things building on we lose certain organization, we give the organization a certain so that's this we say
That's a really great proposition. I'm smiling because I think it is so important who is serving the organization, who is the organization serving. And if we can think of like the training process of distilling those two things into two different areas, what are they intersecting in the separate? How are we meeting through our organizations the mandate of the organizations? And how are we meeting personally our role within the organization? And our role in thinking about what equity, diversity, inclusivity looks like. Because sometimes our failure and fear is sometimes because we have a different relationship as a person to equity, diversity, inclusivity than an organization. Because those two things are something that are and so we feel that we should be silent and not speak about certain injustices happening in organizations because we're in the organization. This is what's going on. Living right here. And so I think it's a really interesting space also to be right about what and how do I begin to research practices within organizations that do not actually value the role of everybody to stay. Or I begin to through these parts of the processes as mentioned, HR program evaluation begin to chip away to be what the organization. Thank you. I'm going to see if there's any comments online. Let's see. Any thoughts, comments on these things? This is not a little bit, but in 30 minutes or so is what are some of the qualitative things that is involved in this particular work?
So in my experience, I'm not sure if this is on or not.
Is it on?
Test.
Yeah.
So when I said
Yeah, that is.
We'll get another mic to you.
In my own experience, in the workplace, there are a lot of injustices, things that are said on the side. And I think the approach that I've seen that kind of works to get rid of the people on the other side of, of this is the relationship building, right? They need to kind of get to know me, I need to get to know them, and even though they don't maybe open up that opportunity, I can be them myself and build that bridge myself and be that conduit. It takes a strong mind and certain personality to do that. And to see some of the young people too, like floundering a little bit and being able to be around them and kind of sharing how, listen, we can do things differently. We can be vulnerable and strong, stand our ground, and there's a balance, there's an art to it. There's an art and a dance to all of that. So, and that's what I just wanted to say. There is an important thing about the relationships and opening yourself up to be that part of that change.
Yeah, it's very early.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it's very.
I want to acknowledge finding voice in the room, given our conversation earlier. So thank you for that sharing. And it's really also interesting in doing this work, I think what some of the qualitative examples are, it's actually that. It's actually the transferring of professional development skills to employees or art workers within large organizations. And I'm smiling because I think of I'm smiling because I think back to when we decided to embed this year the critical response process as part of the work that we do within the organization. And it's embedded in the work that we do in CPAMO, but offering that as a way of thinking through feedback and generating ideas, building organizations was not easy. And it's still not easy. Right, and it offers then another way for individuals to consider professional development. So they may come in, and this is one of the qualitative things and experiences over the 10 years is now, and you guys see anything you can do here. Many come in going, I'm doing this for my organization, and at the end they realize a wide range of other skill building and awareness building that is personal, that they can implement in their organizations. And so the critical response process is one. The critical response process, I'm certified in non-means, I'm certified in it. But it's put through Liz Berman, who works at the Mass Exchange in DC, and critical response process from feedback. There's 4 steps. And it starts with statements of meaning, right? What do you see in the room? It's not about the big ideas. It's like, what is the meaning of the big things in the sharing? And then as an arts administrator or as an organization, you may have questions. Right, what are those questions? And then it invites persons experiencing programming or want to ask questions. And in the case we use it with the organizations is the other organizations get to ask of that organization presenting their ideas for the questions. And sometimes someone asks you a question and you're like, wow, never thought about it. And so everyone becomes a subject matter expert in the room. And then you get your opinions, because at some point you are creating a safe space, a communicative space to organizations that you don't have to then go, I'm going to be, I'm going to have to do this. I'm keep the statement on the field. Because in the organization, you don't know. At that point, you're able to just go, no, I think that I see this as a notice, and I think that you should do this. You should consider this. You should consider the resources, as mentioned. You should consider, trading. You should consider, and it's running in a way that's actually really meaningful and safe, because you build that safety for yourself. And it then is amplified because you're learning that process. but you can take that to the so it's engaged within the development process. It's something you can take away. And if you want to do the certification, go right ahead. What I do notice, however, in this experience is how hard it is when we begin to put titles to the things that we do, how hard it is to offer feedback. We often go, they're gonna like say, they're gonna judge me and they know you're an expert in this area as well. We also have ideas that are worth onto the space, to the sector, to the industry, to all the things that we're talking about. And those should also be placed in the space today. And so thank you for that. It's really, really interesting and beautiful. And it's really interesting to mention also the support required for persons in different organizations. So I think sometimes organizations, from my experiential perspective, they will send their employees on staff, on training, on the stage, right? Because the organization needs it, but what support do I need to deliver this meeting? Either in the process I'm going through for 2 years or through the organization. And that goes back to our conversation in the morning around how do we begin to embed those practices within the organization, right? So it's not an offshoot. It's not, we're going to do this for 2 years and then we've done the training and move on, right? We're always be changing and building and being iterative with how that and what that might look like.
Yeah, I just want to speak to meeting together, fighting together process and tool for it, because I was at research leading on that. And I had some point in the mind on how it as tools and tips and frameworks, and as we think to make it right. But the actual process started with a collaborative and depolitizing process in that you came up against all of these in the process, all of these emotions, all of these internal assumptions that are to do with I guess colonized systems. It is a shortened time to the residency and the CPAMO, which was a space for us to put fragments of their original stories out, is a space that's unfinished. So as ours was speaking, I need to perfect this, I need to wait till it's done, till it's played. But it was actually a process of in a short period of time, putting together what would end up being more provocations and questions to consider as part of the process. So yeah, both the content and the process was, as you say, an experiential way of learning and I guess applying different strategies or approaches.
And that's so important. I think it goes back to also what I was saying earlier about the product. Right? So we focus on it. When we do this thing, we do this rather than the process of that, right? Because that's where we learn. That's where the sharing can potentially happen as well. And so and I'm always curious about the process, right? I'm also curious about also the responsive nature of organizations and persons to the process rather than to or you've done the thing because you're always doing it. There should always be like we were talking about earlier in the workshop on learning space. You should always be in a space where you're always resorting back to something and going, really like this. Really, because it changes. We spoke earlier this morning about the problematics and I was listening and all the words and and where artists and entrepreneurs are functioning, right? Because for too long, it's been stagnant. It's like it is this, it is really this, but it's what it should do. The same way demographics in our country should do, the same way people move to the arts should, the same way that communities are wanting to become engaged. Right, so we stay, no, we've done equity, diversity, inclusivity, you have the right people for it, and there it is. If we moved beyond that. And I see Natasha doing some sharing in the chat, and she mentioned developing an action plan that's directly tied to indicators that evaluate impact as a qualitative piece. For example, annual measures of belonging, surveying the community to see how this evolves with shifts in with practices and policies. I see also another comment from Natasha, also tracking feedback. You mentioned or ABI line, like document and monitor the feedback and get through that channel as an indicator of organizational change, especially in time. So there are also now these methodologies or ways to think through how this form of organizations can begin to track and document. And those are valid things that, pushing back, because I love pushback, and so yeah, I love pushback. Track those things and draw that data and organizational effects when you apply it to these particular spaces that we call councils and foundations. Right? Because I think that's how the value of the work continues. And let them figure out why there is both a quantitative and qualitative assessment. Because we're seeing an organization. You need to do this work. We are okay submission. And we can let you know what we do, the processes we've gone through to get to where this work. Thank you. Thank you, Natasha. Yes, ma'am.
Hey there, for those who can't see me online, it's Aaron here. My organizational development side is wearing its head. So my apologies if I speak in some kind of corporate terms, but I find that sometimes going back to that language is actually very productive when dealing with people who are pushing back on these things. And there's a few observations I'm hoping I can remember. First off, I want to acknowledge Natasha's excellent comments in the chat. Because looking at what effectively she's talking about is how to show progress, markers, indicators of success, indicators of moving forward. It's not a one and done. A lot of people think, oh, I just have to check the box. Let's just give it to HR. And they take this kind of very important work and they just don't want to do it with it. Or they post it, they use it and abuse it, put things on their website to say, look what we did. But it's potentially, there is no progress. So putting in action plans with effective markers or indicators, and those are going to evolve. And we're still figuring out what some of those are. Because those of us raised in a colonialized corporate environment, there's certain markers we've been taught to look for. It's always around money, right? Market share and all of that. And while not to negate those completely, there are other very valuable markers that show that this work is valuable. And I think we're still discovering them. And people with different lived experience and different intersectionalities, you're going to find different markers that you didn't realize. But the key is to ask questions and listen and validate what you hear. So definitely not a one and done. To Kelly's comment about it's not the product, it's the process. How do we keep the process alive when so many organizations are focused on the product? And that's where I think about milestones. And sort of, cover top, but markers that show where we're going, where we've been and where we're going. And I had a great mentor and leader at one point in my career that when we get discouraged, and our energy was depleting. We worked so hard on all these projects, and for what? And he would come back and go, look at where we were and look at where we are. And he would mark all the things that we did, even though we still had a ways to go. It brought us back and it revitalized us. And it kept buy-in from those that we were engaging. So think about that, about, what helps that progress, what sustains that progress, what will get buy-in. Because this work is valuable and it's hard. I'm sure we'll all agree on that. And, I know for myself, I've moved mountains to make sure I'm here today, even though I may be tired and I may be thinking, the work is too important for me not to be here. That's what I feel about it. So let's see how we can rally that dedication in others, but also protect ourselves. Because I think another valuable comment made today is about building relationships. And evaluating those relationships is an important indicator as well. Because sometimes you can think about the great strides I made in relationships I built. But those might fizzle in a second. So are they quality long-term relationships? Or are they short-term relationships? Both have value in different ways. But I know from my own experience, I've worked with people for decades. And I thought I had a good relationship with them. And as soon as we bring up DI, they're done with me. And the relationship, all those years of investment were gone. So, you look at who you're working with, and adjust accordingly. A short-term relationship isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it's about preparing yourself and engaging your energies accordingly. And I hope I remember to say everything I wanted to speak to, because I wanted to acknowledge. And I hope everyone will remember some of the wonderful indicators that Natasha mentioned. I thought those were incredibly good and often overlooked in annual reports, and, things that people were talking about success in the organization. And we thought.
Thank you so much. And I'm knowing that so relationship building, short-term, long-term, what does that look like in this work? And also for the organizations that are part of this process. And then also communicating on the work organizations are doing in whichever way. That could be communication to the boards, that could be communication to the artists, to the funders, whomever. So thank you for that. Seven minutes, yeah. 7 minutes left. No, I wanted to seek your permission to include you in this conversation. Given that you are one of the small organizations, but you also been working in partnership with other organizations, and then you also have been on this journey with CPAMO probably since the same time I was. We're talking dismantling of the stand for the days. Yeah, but I can't cancel. Way too far though. I mean, how young was it? Program coordinator of the first year. That's how long ago it was. Before she was at Solution. Yes. So, we're talking about qualitative ways of tracking and working through experiencing the CPAMOPOC organization, the program, and, just I'm making notes on those things to share that as well. So, giving thoughts because we're also talking about experts here, and we're online also ideas and thoughts. I'll open it up also for comments and ideas after so we can be sure.
Just to give you a couple, hashtag brag alert. I just coming in, I was at FactCon yesterday in house, so I flew in the house last night. So I'm tired. The Black Pledge was at act on, really connecting on what we're doing and how we push the work forward. And we had a really generative and challenging conversation with Afro Nova Scotian and Black Nova Scotian analysts. Continue to do that really well. But yeah, to your question about qualitative, sort of evaluation, I feel like this in and of itself, like we were just gathering and talking, is deeply important to us understanding where we've come from and where we're going. And I don't think this can be underestimated. I think it's deeply important to me. And we can online story too, that we can meet face to face and have a facilitated conversation. I think I'm also going to say the quantitative is important too. And then I'm like, oh yeah, then we take this time to do that. Because I think it's so easy to just be going from program, and there's always work to do. So I've really been thinking about that, the trajectory of Black Pledge, which if I go into the fourth year now, and I'm like, okay, it might be actually take 4 or 5 months to just really build a little bit more structure, and also to just maybe do some evaluation and some of that review time, and then how we got go, and really take the time to do that, and maybe taking the time to do things that don't immediately seem quote unquote productive as a part of us continuing to do those processes, is our relationship to time and what we're willing to do, what we're not willing to do, what seems important, and who decides what's important. I think that even just taking this time, I would say, and thinking about Paul Canada right now, we're about to finish our first iteration of All Together Now, which came out of CPAMOPOC. And it's going very well. And I think the biggest thing I'm kind of taking away from it is that these organizations, these whole organizations took their time to think about these things. So I don't think that they really did it before, or they were able to really do. So just even this moment to contemplate is actually deeply important, and often within my lifetime, there's always going to what's next, show me that trust. And you're like, can we just take the time to think and ask these questions of ourselves and be clear about, and then it becomes clear anyway what we know that we don't know. We're taking the time to learn and grow from other organizations as they talk about the things and successes and challenges that they have. And it's an 8-7 process, it's been over 3 months. And I'm about it. I'm a little tired, but I'm about it. I'm about taking 7 weeks, every other week to meet and come together. And so, yeah, that's deeply important, and that's even I feel that we talked about is just the time that we took to meet each other and learn and grow with each other is like deeply valuable, even more so than the material that we learned. So that was so strong, but I hope that adds to the conversation.
That I know strong.
Okay, good.
Very Toronto. It's very sweet that you approach it from west to east and north to south. I love it. Facts. What's really beautiful, and I will just send these things back to this idea of gathering and talking. And I remember the first, so let me back up for a second and talk about CPAMO for those who are completely on either online or in the space about what the program is. It's an educational program on equity, diversity, and inclusivity for organizations. And it's a 2-year process. And you go through everything from community engagement, from equity diversity lens, HRs and organization policies from that particular lens, programming from that particular lens. Wow, this is involved. There's so much more conflict resolution and mitigation from an equity diversity and informed lens. Community engagement, arts practices from that particular lens as well. So it's about 5-step leadership, organizational leadership. Also, particular things. Yes.
quickly add to that, as artists and arts organizations, thank you, as artists and artist organizations, and often we're small, we're resource, or we're chasing grants and donors and all of that, it means we have to do a lot with a little. And one thing I really love about the CPAMOPOC process is that we're aiming to bring tools and resources to those that partner with us that they wouldn't get otherwise, and that are often at the beck and call of an organization that hasn't operated in a lot of funds. Having worked in the private sector, but always loving the arts, I would see that disparity. And I think that's why I love working with CPAMO, because I see some of the excellent tools that are out there, but also listening for different perspectives so that we're sharing these things. Because I was point about sharing with other organizations. There's amazing tools and amazing support. So that's what I think to me, CPAMOPOC's all about. And I was like promoting it because I want everyone to reflect and think about what organization would benefit from participating. And we don't like we screw people carefully because we want commitment. But there's so many organizations that are starved for the competencies and starved for the resources. This is one way of getting into.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No worries. And I go back to this idea of the resources and getting to people, and also that's why the publication came up into being, because we're learning on these things and environment service. Same thing online. Most of our publications are actually on our website as tools and tools that people to think of. Except for NFP, the book is very about. It has thoughts on it's Shannon gets murders and Shannon has contributed. So it has thought thinkers and it's the subject matter experts offering ideas to organizations to the sector itself. I remember the first time we did CPAMOPOC, that was the first time, and I think it was like 10 organizations. And that was the first time all the EDs were in space together. And that to me resonates really, really well because I know CDA was there and Latin was a little back. And some of the partnerships that came from that first year. Because we're like, oh no, we're talking about, access and equity, women in the arts, and so we should do something. We need to show parking and do things. That's a beautiful thing around the potential gathering in space and sharing ideas and thoughts and seeing what partnerships and collaborations can implement. So I think that's a really nice, interesting qualitative seminar. And then also building the time for assessment. I think that's an important piece around thinking also ahead of this particular things. One of the things, this crazy mind of mine, so it's the first time we're moving to a co-director model to early in oneself. And because we embed the CRP in the organization, and because we got funding to look at what is a viable co-director model for the organization. I thought, well, let's do a CRP, and it's been done since we signed a contract. So let's do a CRP. Let's, as staff members for the organization, let's do a CRP. Statements of meeting. What questions do you have? You can at least so we are able to find this idea of tracking what staff is experiencing in this collaboration. But then also what we can use to look around the world about what are the gaps, what are the strengths within our mind, how we're experiencing it, and then how we can use particular support to create a process of co-director model for other big arts organizations or organizations. So that's also another thing to the assessment process. What I love about is how those assessments happen and when we're creating time for those things. Sometimes you think ahead, so you go, all right, I'm gonna, I need what is that? We work a lot with form-based CPAMO work, and from the forms, we're able to track these things rather easily. So now, like our request for submission, our first process is all online. So we have now all the buyers of properties. I know before assessment period, I'm like, oh, we'll have 40 applications. Oh, good. Okay, that's gonna take about 2 hours. Because I can now, through a form basis, track all these things in real time. Sort of same thing with also how you can process invoices, like drop PDF in a folder. No, more detail opportunity. Unless you want to decipher through 100 email and 50 emails a day, don't email it as we have because we find missing. So, drop in a folder. This is a folder, it's over. If I review something or the journal reviews something, a comment is made. This writing needs to be correct. We need to adjust. So we're working efficiently through thinking through assessment and evaluation forms, even the organization is a learning process as well. I also see here with the response from Natasha saying that also those markers can be helpful to hold persons accountable. Right? Because you're looking at, you put one cup here, so another cup here, something, and the other one's a little bit. But and you are able to look at what is accountability structures or accountability measures, for a better word, through your organization or to an organization through these processes. And so thank you for that as well, Natasha. I think it's equally important. The accountability and responsibility piece, some things, and I know in many organizations, it would be around leadership. So, right, one of our medical sections is on like, what does that leadership look like? And in my coordinator role, or even when I was through the programming, so you look at responsibility. I don't know how to do that. I'll be the one to be like, sometimes I do that. I'm like, I don't know because I want to value other person's input in those kinds of things. And then we're like, oh yeah, we can try this and all that. We are actually working on organizational and team building to this idea of like getting ideas from each other and building up on those particular ideas. Evidenced by our work, Victoria Guzzer, who's cleared of communications, has a visualized pattern. Once we go through all this stuff, I'm like, you're responsible for filling the space. I don't even I'm like, I trust you. You have a subject matter expertise in this particular area, and just let me know how I can support you and what you support. So some of those relationships we've been working collaboratively, even within the organization. As a part to it. Any thoughts, comments? Give me a tap for this. 15 minutes, 15 or so. Only with the one kick. If you have any comments or other sort of like qualitative things, because that's where we're spending most of the rest of the conversation is like, what are some of these markers and these experiences that we it's really like you as we experience or really like as part of its own process. And to also dig deeper into what the process is over 2 years, organizations are led to these particular sort of things, and they won't actually have any service projects. And then there are signs sort of like facilities between self and Erin that will use as ground-based instigators. Yeah, you thought about this, and you thought about this, and you talk about like how we can partner. So if you're doing this and you have some other partnership, maybe that you're right there. Maybe you want to partner between the organizations and some of the things. So I think sometimes as organizations, we say things about us as well. We're like, oh, this is big enough. And just like, is there someone else out there that you want to work with? That's really, what's your passion project? It could be partnership with another organization in achieving some of those project pieces. And we have some of those examples in something like as well. Do you mind speaking to?
What's the album? This is so big one. We're partnering I'm from here in companies we're partnering with mass culture. And one of the reasons we decided to come together is because we have some very different strengths. They have the focus and we have the networking focus. So we think that and the CPAMO process is very clear about how we define what your organizational processes and needs more needs basically you think that we can work together to reach motivation like working separate organizations we need to work together better to reach the needs.
And what's magical in that is the magic of mass culture as using the arts to engage civil society across the country through the arts. And of course, cultural cultures has also a national, but also a show that is about how do we engage with artists in different spaces, in these spaces, so the design of reach is also interesting. You don't have to go in there and go, and make it either funding to them. Is there an organization that has a large reach that we can partner with to achieve the same goals? Right, and then could that be also based in a space of equity and inclusive things? And I love that because I think there are many examples. Having worked with Anthony Cottages as an artist, there are many examples of that, right? Where one organization can and may have more access to communities. One may have more access to organization buildings and other organizations. And so what is the beauty of that partnership? What is the ways in which you collaborate? And so if you think about organizations and think of the qualitative piece of like, then you both create an action plan and or a document on what collaboration looks like to both your organizations. Then you bring those two things together. So, we got similarity here. And you think about collaboration the same thing here. And these are different. And how do we marry that? So I think that's also a beautiful thing in the process, right? Is that it doesn't, you could have two separate pathways where the intersections of those two pathways. Now we can make that become a passion part of the time. But you'll still have your own ideas. So you're not necessarily even married to organizations to be like, all the time we're going to partner. You're going, what are the advantages of partnering right now? Because it may also, as we mentioned, Erin mentioned, short-term partnership versus long-term partnership. You could be like right now, slowly feel one partner, and we get cleared up. Nothing is right on those. This is what we're about. The equity diversity piece is what this is what we do. Once that is finished and we attract it in the process of formulating that, then we make it what's next. So let's do the CRP to share feedback to we see what questions do you have? What questions are we all right? What's your provisional opinion? We really need more time for this. Or we need to communicate better to not spoke to us. Or we will communicate, I don't think what it was we communicating something like this. It was only us in the staff. Let's figure out the process of how we do that moving forward. We have seamless and also transferable between organizations. Yes.
Yeah, the partnership is so key. To talk a little bit more about Black Pledges partnerships and so on. What came about early on this CPAMOPOC process, you invited us as organizations to help shoot, really come on our conversation about what he's doing. And I personally was like, I saw there was a lot of bright faces on that call, and I said, you know, are there people from your organization or racialized who could do this because this training, because it would be very valuable to them? And Megan from the Coral Canada, she just recently stepped in, very recently. She realized that there wasn't, you know, they're pretty small anyway, but really it wasn't quite right. But she was like, if we work with Black Welsh and come up with something together, and we were like, yeah, let's do that. And then that's how the strategic partnership came about for Canada to do the All-Star program to work together. And then we also want to put a conference for program that is a really went to that next year and next year with all kinds of people that definitely at least that was some others who are involved in following your saying who we go to be connected to. So and then also there's about the relationship with personalities as well. Or the business sorting that out, but we still incredibly supportive of Black Legends and things we're supposed to do and really really ways she provides such feedback and support for our work. And so it continues to explore that. And then the Elected Presenters Association had their conference and they partnered with like back in April. So they partnered with us with it's culture Black College, and we went out to St. John to co-facilitate a session on community reduced care, which means I'll be asked to go with St. John and to meet people that I'm not going to meet. You know, people who are presenters often in small places in the Atlantic region. That is incredibly valuable, not challenging. Few challenging moments for sure, but that's the kind of work that Black Welsh wants to do, is to reach people all over the country. And so this is the power of partnership. And what's important, I think, about it to highlight, as you said, is that it can and should be how people want to work together and take the time, really take the time to figure out what that is. So they're just right for each party. We spend a lot of time meeting with Megan from Colton and Black Welsh, and so much time meeting and fleshing in the path we work together and talking about it and coming up with, you know, so there's it was a very successful partnership. We spent a lot of time with Lisa and Robin coming up with that session today for the Business Association. So this is what it looks like. It requires time, but feel like the effects, the outcome is really, really deep if we do it right. You know, not that there's only one way of doing it, but when we do it with commitment, with mindfulness, with reciprocity, with process of the product, and we do all of those principles as operations, registered partnership, but the results are going to be quite deep and we're going to be really deeply, you know?
Well, I think that's the perfect end to this conversation around the early and the impact of this project working in qualitative work. You said it perfectly, you know, and seeing that for the most part, but also this small part private living teach the facilitators. So actually supporting organizations having facilitators to do this in different ways, in different communities, for other organizations, for the programming is really interesting, the reciprocity. And also interesting, you know, that conversations around facilitation just goes wrong. Because facilitators may not have the breadth of understanding who's in these communities, who's organizations working together, using to work. And so thank you for providing value to that with your response and to the work that we do. On that note, we're going to transition again.